They said the screams stopped after the second night. But those who lived closest to the ridge swore they could still hear them, carried through the fog, long after the house was ash and the bodies had been claimed. The sound wasn't like a person dying. It was higher, thinner, stretched past human breath, like something being torn from itself. The land there has never healed. You can still see the blackened circle, where the soil won't take seed, where even moss refuses to grow. It's as if the earth remembers. Locals call it the hollowing. Children aren't allowed near it. Not since the day they dug up what they thought was bone, but turned out to be a doll. Or what was left of one, soon with real hair and teeth. The story begins long before the fire, before the girl, before the family that tried to erase themselves from God's light. It begins with a birth that should not have been possible. 2 heartbeats inside one body, one older than the other, both belonging to the same bloodline. The midwife, an old woman whose name is lost to time, later told a traveling priest she felt something move beneath the girl's ribs, like fingers tracing the inside of a womb that did not want to open. When the child finally came, it was silent. No cry, no gasp, only the sound of the mother whispering, "She's clean, she's ours." That night, the wind carried the smell of iron across the valley. Dogs wailed, crows gathered on rooftops, and in the house that would one day burn, a father knelt beside his newborn daughter and thanked a God whose name he would never say aloud. No one outside that hollow was told of the birth. Not the doctor, not the pastor, not even the neighbors. But in the days that followed, something changed in the air. The well water turned dark for a week. The cows stopped producing milk, and in the mirror of that newborn's eyes, those who dared to look swore they saw 2 reflections, not one. Years later, when the flames finally came, the firemen found that same mirror. Cracked, blackened, and etched along its frame were 4 words carved by hand. Keep the blood inside. Kin, which city are you watching from, and what time is it right now? If you drive far enough past the last gas station, beyond the power lines that end at the tree line, you'll reach it. A patch of forgotten country the maps no longer claim. Old atlases mark it as Ward's Hollow, but the sign was taken down decades ago. The road curls like a serpent through the hills, past broken mailboxes and houses that lean as if tired of standing. That's where she was born, the girl with the doubled reflection. Locals still whisper her name, though not at night. Not when the wind presses against the windows. They say she was born pure, untouched by outsiders, a child of the covenant. But those who remember the smell of that birthroom know better. They remember the stains that never washed out of the floorboards. The way her mother refused to leave her bed for 40 days. Rocking back and forth, repeating the same words under her breath. She's the one who'll close the circle. Ward's Hollow was never a normal town. Its people didn't come from elsewhere. They sprouted from the same ground. Records show the same 5 surnames repeating for over a century. The census lists dwindled until the last entry in 1964, when the government stopped sending anyone to count. The reason wasn't official neglect. It was fear. The Hollow had rules. Never draw blood on a Sunday. Never marry beyond the hill. And never, under any circumstance, let an outsider see the book. No one knows who wrote the book or when. But those who've caught a glimpse, it describe something closer to a ledger than a Bible. Names scratched in ink the color of rust, births and pairings arranged with the precision of breeding stock. At the top of every page, a single symbol, a circle around a cross burned into the parchment. The girl grew up beneath that symbol. It hung above her cradle, stitched into her blankets, carved into the back of her mother's hand. By the time she was old enough to speak, she already knew the words of the prayers. Not the Lord's Prayer, but one written only for their blood. The elders would kneel before her, touching her skin as if it carried proof of prophecy. They said she was born clean because her parents were brother and sister, and that made her closer to divine than human. When she turned 7, they began preparing her for her role. White dresses, silent meals, lessons in scripture rewritten by their own hands. And on the last page of the book, next to her name, there was already another written in faded ink, her brother's. They said one day those two names would be bound together, not in love, in obedience. By the time she was 10, the valley had learned to stay quiet. Even the animals seemed to keep their distance from the hollow. Travelers who wandered in by mistake, hunters, surveyors, census men, never stayed long. They spoke afterward of the stillness, of how sound seemed to vanish between the trees, of how the people there looked alike in a way that wasn't natural. Her family's house sat at the base of the ridge, surrounded by a fence of sharpened wood posts. Each post bore a mark scorched into it, the same circle and cross from the book. It wasn't meant to ward off danger. It was meant to keep it in. The girl was homeschooled, though there was no teacher. Her mother taught her letters carved on birch bark. Her father taught her silence. "Words are for outsiders," he said. "Silence is for the chosen." There were no birthdays, no holidays, no laughter. Only the rituals that began each dawn. Washing the hands in cold well water, kneeling before the portrait above the mantel, reciting the passage that began, "Through kin comes cleansing." There were no mirrors in the house anymore. Her father had broken them, all after she began to speak to her reflection. She had whispered to it at night, called it by name, though no one ever taught her the name she used. When asked who she was talking to, she'd said, "The one inside me, the one who remembers." It was around then that she began drawing strange shapes in the dirt, circles within circles, each one crossed at the center. Sometimes she'd press her palms into the soil until her fingernails bled. When her mother found her one morning crouched over a dead bird, she wasn't crying, she was humming. The same tune the elders sang in the chapel. The chapel itself stood at the edge of the property, a sagging wooden structure with boarded windows. No cross, no steeple. Just that symbol burned above the door. Inside, the air smelled of oil and damp wood. There was no pulpit, only a table with a leather-bound book resting at its center. When she turned 12, she was allowed inside for the first time. She said later, "It didn't feel like a church. It felt like a womb." The air was thick and warm, and on the walls, written in faded red, were lines that looked like scripture but read like commandment. "Thou shalt not seek new blood. Thou shalt not speak thy lineage to strangers. Thy womb shall keep the circle unbroken." That night, her father marked her wrist with ash, the shape of the circle. Her mother kissed it and said, "Know you belong." From that day forward, they stopped calling her by her name. They called her Bride of the Line. And outside, in the woods, someone was watching the house. A stranger who didn't belong, who had no idea what that name meant. He came in the spring of 1986. A surveyor from the county, or so he said. His truck broke down 2 miles past the last paved road, smoke rising from under the hood like a warning. He wasn't supposed to go farther, but the map he carried didn't show the hollow's edge, only a pale gap of uncharted green. By evening, he reached the fence. Those wooden posts, blackened with old scorch marks, each one carved with that circle and cross. He thought it was a boundary for livestock. But there were no cattle sounds, no dogs, only wind moving through dry leaves, and in the distance, the faint rhythm of something like singing. He knocked at the house. The door opened partway, revealing a girl, barefoot, thin, pale as milk. Her eyes were strange, not blue, not grey, but the color of ash before rain. She didn't speak. Behind her, a man's voice, low and calm. "No travelers here." The door shut. The surveyor left, or tried to. But the road seemed longer going out than coming in. When he finally reached his truck, the tires were slashed. The windshield cracked from within. He camped there until morning, too afraid to sleep. That night, he heard footsteps circling his tent. Soft, barefoot, deliberate. He didn't see anyone, but when the sun came up, there was a mark drawn in the dirt beside his campfire, a circle around a cross. Weeks later, the county sent another man to retrieve him. The surveyor had been found at a diner miles away, sitting silent, eyes unfocused, repeating the same phrase. "They keep the blood inside." He left town the next day and was never heard from again. But before he disappeared, he'd turned in his notes. Sketches of the fence, the symbol, and one phrase scribbled on the last page of his report. "She's the one they're preparing." That summer, the girl turned 13. The family held a gathering, the first in decades. Relatives came down from the hills, faces nearly identical, voices soft and low. They filled the chapel with candles and hymns that had no melody, only rhythm. The girl was made to stand at the center, head bowed, hands clasped. Her father read from the leather book, her mother wept, and the elders nodded in approval. On the table beside her lay 2 items, a silver blade and a ring of braided hair. When the ritual ended, she bore a thin cut across her palm and a new mark on her chest, not drawn, but burned into her flesh with a heated coin. That night, the hills echoed again with singing. But beneath the song was another sound, faint but unmistakable, the wailing of a newborn. No one in the hollow had been pregnant. No one had given birth. Still, by morning, there was a cradle in the chapel, and inside it, wrapped in white cloth, something moved. The cradle was carved from cedar, old and splintered, the kind used generations ago when children were born at home. Before hospitals, before records. The cloth that swaddled the infant was yellowed with age, like it had been waiting for this moment. No one claimed the child. Not the girl's mother, not the elders, not even the midwife who always appeared when blood was spilled. Yet they all gathered around it in the chapel, whispering prayers in that old tongue, the one that sounded like English, but wasn't. The girl stood in the corner, her hands still bandaged from the ritual. She said she felt drawn to the cradle, as if something inside it recognized her. When she looked down, the baby opened its eyes, and she saw her own face staring back. The elders said nothing. They simply nodded, one by one, as though a prophecy had been fulfilled. The girl asked whose child it was. Her mother answered with a trembling voice, "Yours, and not yours." From that night on, the child was kept in the cellar beneath the chapel. The girl was told to visit daily, to sing to it, to feed it, to teach it words, but only words from the book. The baby never cried, never laughed. Sometimes it would stare past her shoulder, eyes wide, mouth twitching as if mimicking her speech. It grew faster than it should have. Within months, it was walking. Within a year, speaking in broken phrases that made the older women flinch. The girl began having dreams of herself standing over the cradle while another version of her, older, watched from the doorway. Sometimes she woke with her hands bleeding, soil under her nails, the smell of smoke in her hair. One evening, when the wind outside howled through the trees, she crept into the cellar alone. The air was heavy, sweet with rot. The child sat in the dark, humming the same hymn she'd been taught. But when she whispered its name, the one she'd secretly chosen, it turned its head slowly and said, "That's your name, not mine." She fled, stumbling up the steps, heart pounding. Her father met her at the door, calm as always, and said, "You've seen the reflection now. That means it's begun." The next day, the cradle was empty. The cellar smelled of ash. Her mother told her the child had been taken back. "Folded into the blood," she said. From then on, the girl was not allowed near the chapel. The book disappeared from the altar. And at night, through the cracks in the floorboards, she swore she heard the faint sound of a baby's breath rising from beneath the house. Years later, when the county sent another inspector to Ward's Hollow, he would record that the family claimed only one child lived there, but the census listed 2 births, both with the same name. By autumn, the hollow had grown quieter still. No visitors, no letters, no sounds save for the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the river that cut through the valley like a scar. The girl, no longer a child, began to notice the ways the house seemed alive. How the floorboards pulsed faintly beneath her feet, how doors breathed in the dark. She would wake to find her window open, though she'd latched it herself. The curtains swaying, though there was no wind. Some mornings her bed was damp with soil, her hands caked in it, as though she'd been digging in her sleep. Then came the knocking, always from beneath the floor, soft at first, then sharper, rhythmic, 3 knocks, a pause, then 2. Her father said it was the house settling. Her mother only prayed harder, but the girl knew the pattern. It was the same rhythm the child used to tap on the cradle's edge when she sang. She tried to tell them it was still there, the other one, but they refused to listen. Her father warned her, "There is no other. There is only the line." Yet one night, when the moon was low and red through the mist, she followed the knocking. She lifted a loose plank near her bed and found a hollow space below. Inside it, a small mirror, cracked, its surface dark as oil. She had never seen it before, but when she lifted it toward the light, it reflected not her face but the child's, older now, smiling. The reflection whispered, though her lips didn't move, "You took my name." She dropped the mirror. It shattered, releasing a sound like breath. The candle beside her went out. For a moment, the entire house seemed to exhale. And then she heard it again, a baby's faint cry, coming not from below, but from within the walls. The next morning, her father was gone. His boots were still by the door, his coat still hanging. Only the front gate was open, and the footprints leading away from it were bare. Her mother wouldn't speak. She sat by the hearth, rocking slowly, whispering the hymn under her breath. When the girl begged to know what happened, her mother said, "The blood takes what it's owed." That night, the chapel bell rang for the first time in years. Though no one was there to pull the rope, the sound rolled through the valley like thunder. And when the girl stepped outside, she saw the candles in the chapel flicker to life one by one. She went to the door, trembling. The wood was warm under her hand, as if something inside was breathing against it. She pushed it open. The cradle was back, and inside it lay the mirror, whole again. But this time, there were 2 reflections staring up at her. One smiled. The other wept, and both whispered in unison, The circle is unbroken. The next days passed without measure, light and dark blending into one long breath. The valley's fog thickened until even noon looked like dusk. The girl's mother sealed the windows with cloth and ash, whispering that the sun had grown unclean. She would not eat. She would not sleep. The girl tried to leave once, made it as far as the edge of the fence. But the air beyond it felt heavy, like walking through water. Every sound dimmed. Her skin crawled. And when she stepped closer, she saw what she hadn't before. The ground around each post was sinking, as though something beneath the soil had been moving for years, circling. That night she woke to find her mother gone. The door stood open, letting in the cold. From the woods came the faint hum of voices, low, droning, familiar. She followed the sound barefoot through the fog until the trees thinned, revealing the chapel. Every window glowed with candlelight. The singing grew louder. Inside, the pews were filled, not with the living. They were pale, still, their heads bowed. Bodies that had long since returned to the soil, now propped upright in worship. At the front stood her mother, eyes closed, arms raised. And on the altar, the mirror, upright, reflecting everyone in the room except her. Her mother turned, face streaked with ash. "It's your turn," she said softly. "The blood must fold." The girl screamed, but the sound didn't leave her throat. It echoed instead inside the mirror, where her reflection began to move on its own. It reached through the glass like water, fingers pale and trembling, and pressed its hand against hers. Then the candles went out. In the dark, the voices changed. No longer hymns, but murmurs. Thousands of them. She could feel them crawling behind her eyes, whispering names she had never learned, but somehow recognized. The mirror pulsed like a heart. The reflection's mouth opened, and she felt her own lungs stop. When the light returned, her mother was gone. So were the bodies. Only the cradle remained, empty except for a smear of ash and the mark. A perfect circle, freshly burned into the wood. She ran from the chapel, but the world outside had changed. The fence was gone. The trees leaned inward, their branches intertwining above her like ribs. And where the house once stood, there was only a pit, deep and black. From its depths came a lullaby. Her mother's voice, faint, broken, fading into the soil. She looked down, trembling, and saw movement. Dozens of faces just below the surface, turning upward toward her, all her own. They smiled, and one by one, they whispered, "You were never the first." By dawn, the fog had thinned, but the hollow was gone. No road, no fences, no chapel. Only the pit remained, silent and breathing. The girl stood at its edge, her hair matted with ash, her eyes hollow as the valley beneath her feet. She thought she heard her mother's voice again, faint, beneath the earth, calling her name, or what used to be her name. The sound rose and fell like wind through reeds. She leaned closer, and for a moment, she saw movement in the dark, not bodies, not even shadows, something older than flesh, twisting in slow rhythm, as if the soil itself remembered. Then she saw it, the book, half buried, its cover blackened, pages fluttering without wind. She reached for it. The moment her fingers touched the leather, the ground shifted, a sigh from the pit, deep and endless. The circle burned into her wrist, flared white, hot, and the air filled with whispers. Through kin comes cleansing. Through blood comes return. Through you, the circle breathes again. She tried to let go, but the book clung to her palm, pulsing like a living thing. Her veins darkened, her reflection spreading through the air around her. Thousands of her faces, blinking in the mist, each one whispering what the others could not. There is no end. The pit shuddered once, then fell still. When the county men came months later, following old maps and dead signals, they found nothing. Just an expanse of earth where Ward's Hollow used to be, flat and grey like cooled ash. No bones, no structures. Only a faint impression in the ground. A perfect circle, 30 feet wide, with a smaller cross burned at its center. And yet, at night, travelers say the air still hums there, like something beneath the soil is dreaming. Some say if you stand in that field long enough, you'll hear a woman humming a lullaby, the kind sung to babies long before they had names. Others say if you listen closer, you'll hear two voices singing, perfectly in sync, one above, one below. And in the stillness between them, if you're quiet enough, you might hear a third. It's the sound of the circle closing, the blood remembering itself. The hollow never ended. It only went underground.